Coast FM 963. It's 22 minutes past 11. I have the pleasure of having our resident psychologist, Carlos Camacho, in the studio again this week. Thanks for coming in, Carlos.
G'day, Deb. How are you?
Great. Good to see you.
Great.
And I'm okay, thank you. Last week we spoke about the shadow side, didn't we? Yeah, and we said we'd do part 2 this week because there's so much you love talking about with that.
That's right,
topic.
and that topic led to us finishing up with the existentialists and how they saw the psychology of the human being, and I thought it'd be a wonderful way to chronologically, in a way, continue the subject.
Yes, great idea. Now, can you please give us a definition of existential psychology?
Wow, how long do you have? We need a couple of hours, but existential psychology came about in the late 60s and 70s, but it was derived from the existential philosophy movement from the 50s, 40s, 50s and 60s. And just around Jung's time and Freud, they were around in the 30s and so forth. There was also another movement happening through a philosopher called Martin Heidegger, who was also German. Okay. And he studied another philosopher who was also German called Eleanor Husserl. And Eleanor Husserl just previously had worked out a new system of philosophy, and in a way that rather than try to understand the world through reason and find out what is such a thing, he invented a way of studying the world, and it was called phenomenology with a PH. And he invented a way where rather than find out what is, it's how do I feel about this? And that rang true to Martin Heidegger, and he developed that sense of philosophy where rather than ask questions that can never be answered, he wanted to relate the human being as experiencing the world. Yes. How do I experience the world rather than what is that? So you hold the rock in your hand and rather than ask, what is this rock? What's the matter? You ask, what is my experience with this rock? Okay, how do I feel? How it feels in my hand and so forth. And that was quite interesting because that led to Martin Heidegger working out that philosophy was trying to look at the world as separate to us, and he thought that we are beings in the world. We cannot be disconnected from the world. And that developed a wonderful theory where we're all connected. Yeah, we are, aren't we? We are all connected, including everything, every living being. Yes. And he thought that that's a far better way of describing human nature, because we can then describe it through the way we feel about things. Because it doesn't really matter what is, if it's really about how we feel about what is. That's exactly right. And through reason, we can only get to a certain point anyway. And so through being, then we can actually, because the word being is to be in the present. And human being. Exactly. I am being Carlos now. And so it focuses a lot on how I feel today, how I feel now. And so he had a couple of concepts where he felt that we don't choose where we're born, how we're born, when we're born. We're thrown into the world. That's a very important word, the existentialists say. We're thrown naked, if you like. But also naked culturally, philosophically, and so everything we learn is through what society teaches us. And so, but a lot of those things are misconstrued. So we end up learning a lot of things that aren't true. Like, for example, one that I always say, that there's a positive correlation between happiness and money, that we actually believe that the more money we have, the happier we're going to be. Once you have that, or once you grow older, you realize that maybe that's not true, but it's a bit of a myth. So there's many of those. And then, so he had that part of his philosophy where he called facticity, where we can't get away from that, but we fall into a being that is not ourselves, and therefore we don't become authentic who we really can be. Yeah, which would start right back in childhood, wouldn't it? When you're learning all these things that aren't necessarily true about yourself. That's right. And where he differed from Freud and Jung was that Freud and Jung believed a lot that our past made us who we are, our traumas and what we go. Where Heidegger, by pure fact of his philosophy, we were always being towards something. So rather than heading for something. That's right. Rather than being pushed from the past, we're being dragged by our future. It's like having a huge piece of marble there, rock, and you're looking at it, looking, oh, that's a piece of marble, but a sculpture looks at it and go, there's a sculpture within that. I've just got to sculpture out what is not the sculpture.
Yeah.
And so
what's left?
It has the potential of being a beautiful statue. That rock is being thrown into the future as a beautiful statue, but you have to actually pick at it and know how to actually release it from it.
Yeah.
So the true nature of that rock was being a beautiful statue, and that's an analogy, of course, but then Jean-Paul Sartre and Camus developed that, stating that even though we are thrown into the world, we are constantly free to choose what we're going to be.
Okay.
And that developed a concept of total free will, but with it also a dark side, if you like, because we're alone in a way. All our choices are made only by ourselves.
Yeah.
And therefore, what happens is that we are confronted with our freedom. Jean-Paul Sartre called it condemned to freedom. When we're born, we are, in a way, condemned to freedom. We can't escape being free, and that creates anxiety.
Because it's daunting sometimes, because it's up to you.
That's exactly
ourselves.
right. And that could well be true, because there's been research done in countries where people don't have many choices. They know what they're going to eat tonight. They know where they're going to sleep. They know who they're going to marry. And
it's all planned.
It's all planned. They don't have much choices, and there's no difference with happiness levels, funny enough. And there's less anxiety because you're constricted. But what someone like Camus would say is that we have to take that opportunity. Even if things aren't good, we have to feel life for what it is, with the good and the bad. You cannot disconnect. You cannot separate good and bad. As humans, we want to, but
to accept.
Embrace life regardless all the time. And it's a wonderful premise for psychology. Then someone like a psychologist who would be an existential psychologist would use that and say, okay, things aren't good now, but you have to embrace your situation because it's part of who you are, and you have total free choice to change that. And I'm going to help you do that. I'm going to find out what it is, where you sit in that rock, in that marble rock, because you aren't there yet.
Yeah.
You've diverged because you've believed things about you that aren't true.
Yeah.
And other people, you've believed other people.
What they've said about you.
That's right. And therefore, life is good. It's always worth living, and it's always worth defending. And that's the premise. There was a wonderful psychologist called Carl Rogers who invented a client-centered approach, and it's existential or humanistic psychology, and still based on the big name of phenomenology, if you like. And so there's various psychologists that work within that phenomenology type range, but all of them have the I suppose the connecting idea that existence precedes essence. So there is no essence.
Yeah.
You aren't who you are. You decide who you are. And so as life goes by, you may change that, but a psychologist or an existential psychologist may help you choose and help you get to that state of authenticity that maybe at this stage of your life you haven't got to.
Can you use visualization as well to create that?
That's exactly right, because as we know, when we're thinking, because in order to visualize, we have to think. And we create images in our head. Then when we think, there is no real difference for the brain between visualizing and doing.
Yes.
So when we visualize something, it's the same chemical process. The brain doesn't understand the difference between. It's an ontological issue, as they say. It's a reality issue. What is reality? When I think of something that makes me cry, is that so different to being in front of something that makes me cry if it still has the same consequence?
Right.
So
very interesting.
The visualization is
powerful,
very powerful if we use it in order to better ourselves, to visualize ourselves in a position where our life is better.
Okay, so that's one of the tools. And winding it up now, I'd love to talk to you for another 10 minutes on that. It's very, very interesting.
Yes, I love this subject, and I studied it myself in philosophy as well. And, it's an interesting subject because that led to postmodern type thought as we have today. So it's still extremely influential in the way society sees itself today.
Okay. Thanks, Carlos, for coming in. And an interesting song that you've chosen to take us out of the chat. It's the Beatles and Eleanor Rigby. And as you said, because it can be you can be quite alone, can't you, when you're living this way?
As Heidegger said, we're thrown into the world alone.
Yes.
And we're probably going to go that way.
Yes.
And
it's all up to us.
That's right. But in addition, we have to take responsibility for the decisions we make on a daily basis for ourselves.
Yes.
What we eat, how much exercise we do, who we talk to, and how we think. We have to take responsibility. Sure, there are factors around us that are pushing us towards things, but we still have the total freedom to choose. And that sometimes can be great, but it can be lonely. And I thought this song is such a beautiful song.
Well, thank you, Carlos. Have a great afternoon. Here's the Beatles and Eleanor Rigby on Coast FM.